I just cannot thank them enough for the support that they've given us. And I wish that we were judged amongst our peers instead of being judged by other judges who do not know us personally at all.
Administration said they were going to target first.
Yeah.
How do voters react to that? How do communities react to that? Well, we're seeing one example here in South Jersey, and I think we will see more cases like this.
Yeah. And I can't say I was surprised that so many stepped up. I mean, they said that these folks are business people. They pay taxes. They've sought legal status. It's pending. These should not be the people that the Trump administration is going after. That's what the community support is basically saying.
Speaking of business.
Yeah.
Center City, Philadelphia, for many, many years has been built around the business of offices.
Yes.
Office space. That is how Center City has traditionally thrived. Of course, we know since the pandemic, office space is in lower demand, work from home, etc. So what should a city like Philadelphia do with all of that office space? One idea, convert it to housing. One problem. It's expensive to do that. It's very expensive to do that. Office buildings are not laid out like residential buildings. And so Philadelphia is considering a big tax break, a 20-year property tax abatement. 20 years for companies who might take on these types of conversions in Center City. The Inquirer just reported on that this morning. Philadelphia's Tax Reform Commission is considering this proposal. It would only be in place for 5 years, so we'd have a 5-year window to grab this 20-year tax break. But it's a pretty interesting idea. I would imagine there'll be some pushback.
Yeah, because we kind of need the money. The city needs the money. You know, Philadelphia is already likely to face a budget hit from federal funding cuts. And, you know, and I know that one of the commission members kind of said, oh, doing this could help with affordable housing. But because of the expensive nature of these conversions, most times you see them go towards high-end apartments, not affordable apartments, right?
Well, if you listened to our show yesterday, our guest said that does help down market.
Yeah, because that does. Well,
it relieves pressure on other types of housing.
It could do that, but it's so expensive. It's so expensive. Other ideas, though, to sort of get people back into the city could be to cut the wage tax, cut the business taxes, make Philadelphia a more sexy place to want to set up shop.
A sexiness commission.
Yeah, put the leg out on the
Don't
city.
put me on that commission. I would not be helpful. No, but it's an interesting idea, and I think the idea behind it is that they want people to act now because they're worried there's going to be some sort of tipping point in Center City if those conversions don't happen soon, right? And so that's why it's a 5-year window to potentially get the abatement that would last you 20 years because they're worried that the economic conditions for those conversions don't exist now, especially with the high interest rates and the potential tariffs coming. So like we need this incentive right now because if we don't make these conversions, Center City could slide the wrong direction. We'll see. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Third story, here's a renovation that is happening for sure, we think.
Fingers crossed, our neighbor, Franklin Square, is getting some major upgrades.
Our neighbor?
Yeah.
Franklin Square is not a person, by the way. It's a place.
I know, it's a place. And it's very close to WHYY, our headquarters, right across the street near the Ben Franklin Bridge. By the way, the plan was announced yesterday. It'll cost $7.8 million. It'll take 18 months to complete. It'll be a total revamp of the playground and will include climbing boulders, zip lines.
Zip lines?
I know. Path for bikes and and scooters. There will be an amphitheater. There will be a water mister for hot days.
Love a water mister.
Yeah, love a water mister. There will also be replacement of their public bathroom. The last one was built in 1976 for the bicentennial.
That's an old bathroom.
Old. And by the way, this has been one of my favorite places for many years. And part of it, since I started at WHYY during the summers, I like to go over there, relax, eat my lunch, get maybe a milkshake or something from this Franklin Square and just hang out. You have the water fountain there. It's just a beautiful, beautiful little park.
So you excited about this?
I am kind of excited. I mean, I'm not going to go zip lining,
Oh, boo. Go zip lining.
I don't think I'm going to go zip lining on my break, but it seems like it. And they use the park for so many things. It's a beautiful little park.
I love parks, and I have a lot of opinions about parks.
Oh.
So I've come up with a
hear 'em.
list of, these are my Philadelphia park Oscars, okay?
Okay, I'm going to see if I agree. Let's go right. Poskers.
The Papaskers.
Parkskers.
The Parkskers. All right. So I love parks.
Okay. And why do you love parks so much?
Because I have a little kid.
Yeah. And
So in Philadelphia, the park with the best views. This is category number 1. The park with the best views is, let's put that graphic up. That's Penn Treaty Park, right along the Delaware River. Beautiful
I live not too
park.
far from there.
You could see the Ben Franklin Bridge, the whole waterfront. I did consider some parks that had skyline views, but I feel like a skyline view is actually more common in Philadelphia, and a river view is harder to find. A great river view.
I agree with you on this. This is a really great view.
That's the best views.
I can walk to this. This is great. Go ahead.
The park for the best people watching. Park number 2 is Clark Park in West Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah. They have the films. They have
the
film
films,
screening.
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I used to live across the
Shakespeare in the
street from
park.
this park. Every weekend there were people who did a drum circle and people who did LARPing. You know about LARPing?
What is LARPing?
Hard to describe. Live action role play. Basically people with fake swords and stuff, fake fighting each other.
Oh.
Great people watching in West Philly's Clark Park.
Okay.
Park number 3, the best park for kids is Columbus Square Park in South Philadelphia. I'll admit, this is a little home bias. This is near my house. This place is always packed with kids and, crucially, other parents that you can talk to while your kids play.
And didn't they do something new with the playground?
They did.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think we did a whole show on playgrounds and how they help kids.
Yes.
Venture out and be braver.
Your park knowledge is vast. Congratulations.
Yes.
All right. Number 4, the most underrated park in Philadelphia is Sister Cities Park. This park is just surrounded by traffic circles. Okay.
I've seen it. Yeah, I've been there.
You would you have gone there? I feel
have
like
gone
no
there.
one goes to this
It's
park.
right on the Parkway, right?
It's so cool.
I've gotten coffee there.
There's like a little mini replica of the Wissahickon built into this pocket park. It's really cool. And finally, the best overall
I feel
park
like you need a drum roll.
in Philadelphia. Are you ready?
Yes.
Is FDR Park in Deep South Philly.
Yeah.
I
that is
love this
beautiful.
park. It's got everything. It's
That
got
is
nature. It's got fake lakes. It's got running trails. It's got a huge swing set, the biggest swing set in North America.
Nothing like a fake lake, though.
It's a great fake lake. It's like a series of fake lakes. And it's also just, FDR Park is like a melting pot.
Yeah.
Everyone from all over Philly goes to FDR
Yeah.
Park. In my opinion, the best park in Philadelphia. Maybe Franklin Square someday can
Maybe.
aspire to be.
Well, with the
like
zip lines, man, and the water misters. Come on now.
There are no zip lines at FDR Park, I will say. Also, park yourself for today's episode of Studio 2, all about DOGE and its tech access. We're talking with Atlantic writer Charlie Warzel, all about it. On the other side of this break, give us a call, 888-477-9499. And welcome back, everybody, to Studio 2. I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent.
And I'm Cherry Gregg. Some of the most alarming headlines about Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency haven't come from reporters who cover government or politics. They've come from reporters who cover tech. Just today, the tech magazine Wired published a story called "The DOGE Takeover is Worse Than You Think."
Sounds bad. And recently, our guest co-published a deep dive in The Atlantic titled "DOGE Has God Mode Access to Government Data." It can be hard to understand all the details in these stories if you're a layperson like us, but the overall message is stark. Elon Musk and his surrogates are burrowing deep into complex IT systems with all sorts of ramifications for your privacy and the future of our government.
Now, Musk says all of this is about upgrades. At President Trump's first cabinet meeting yesterday, he gave a summary of DOGE's efforts thus far. Take a listen.
I actually just call myself a humble tech support here because this is actually, as crazy as it sounds, that is almost a literal description of the work that the DOGE team is doing, is helping fix the government computer systems. Many of these systems are extremely old. They don't communicate. There are a lot of mistakes in the systems. The software doesn't work.
And Musk says his engineers are going to make it all better. But is that really true? Or is this about access, control, and power? Here to help us make sense of DOGE's tech capabilities and ambitions is Charlie Warzel. He is a staff writer at The Atlantic and author of the newsletter Galaxy Brain. Charlie, welcome to Studio 2.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming on, Charlie. Before we start this conversation, we want to ask folks at home, what do you think about DOGE potentially having access to your private data? Do you have questions about DOGE and its tech capabilities? Give us a call, 888-477-9499. You can also email studio2@whyy.org, or if you're on YouTube, drop your comment right there in the live chat.
And so, Charlie, we want to start this conversation by getting a clear understanding of what's actually happening. Could you tell us, what does DOGE actually have access to?
That's a really complicated question, honestly. And that's part of the problem, I think. This is something we, a lot of us as reporters across different publications, but definitely at The Atlantic, have been trying to find out. And I think the big difficulty here is that the government is massive, right? And the government is broken up into a whole bunch of different agencies, and the systems can be interlinked, but they are not necessarily, they're not always talking to each other all the time. They all do different things, right? The IT systems for different agencies, and all the agencies do different things. So, Treasury, for example, is processing financial payments. It has access to, sensitive bank account information for every American who files their taxes. There are, for every agency, HR systems, which have a whole bunch of sensitive information. DOGE has gone into all of these different agencies over the last month or so since the inauguration, kind of in a haphazard way, right? They haven't entered every single agency yet, but when they have followed this pattern of basically coming in and saying, we need access, these engineers, these contract employees that either Elon Musk or DOGE has hired. They say, we need access to, your IT systems, and we need, full administrative, like the highest top tier, what we call, God mode level privileges. You can see everything, right? That access is extremely, extremely rare in sort of pre-Trump era days to be granted to people, right? You have to follow a whole bunch of procedures, and usually the only people who have access to the full system are people who actually have a really mundane job of like system administrator, right? Like their job is to just see what's going on to make sure if there's something goes down, they can pop in and fix it, or to make sure no one's abusing it. And they are trusted to do that. They have the proper security clearances and training. This is a really long-winded answer, but what I'm trying to say is they're going into these agencies piecemeal, haphazardly, and we don't necessarily always know, right? And part of my reporting over the last month or so has been trying to figure out which agencies DOGE has gone into, but also which agencies they've succeeded in granting this permission. at the Treasury, for example, there is a real debate right now. The White House and the Treasury are saying, they only have certain tiers of access to certain systems. They don't have the full administrative privileges to all that sensitive financial information. And yet there are people who have told reporters at Wired that there is sort of more broad-based level access. So last week or so, we published this story, which you guys referenced, and that story is was really meaningful when we had the sources come to us, and they worked at USAID, and they were able, because they had knowledge of these systems, to give us an understanding of what DOGE got access to when they went in. And the short answer is absolutely everything.
Everything.
Wow.
They got that tier of privilege inside every single system. So the way that they described this to me was, not only did they have access to, the systems that control and mete out the grant funding that goes out to, all different places in the globally, all the different countries that request money. Over, I think, 2 years ago, that system processed close to $60 billion worth of funding. So they have access to that. They could, change or modify those systems, change where the funding goes through, who gets it, what they want to do. But then there's all kinds of, sort of more mundane information inside that system. USAID has tens of thousands of employees, and there is access to the full HR systems. So there's a lot of reputational data there. Yes, there's their social security numbers, there's potentially bank information for payroll, but there's also, say we all work there at USAID together, and 4 years ago, I filed an HR complaint against the two of you. Turns out you were cleared of no wrongdoing. I was incorrect. That information stays in a file, right? Yeah. And that information, if it comes out, could be used without the proper context against somebody reputationally if it gets leaked. That's very sensitive stuff. So anyway, that's the sort of the long and short of we don't know what exactly they have access to in a high level sense. But in the circumstances like USAID where we know that they have access to everything in an unprecedented fashion.
So let's talk about the unprecedented part of this, right? Because we do have commenters kind of pushing back, being like, well, how is this different than the past? Wesley says they've had access since Obama. Y'all only care now because y'all hate Trump. Bryant says everybody has it. Data breaches, companies selling info. Big Brother has always been watching. You say that some of this access has been granted to people who haven't gone through the normal protocols. Is that the only difference? The fact that they haven't gone through the training and the protocols? Or is there something else that distinguishes this type of coordinated access, centralized in like one place, one agency, it's not really agency, but one sort of administrative body like DOGE?
Well, the first thing I would say to one of the commenters who mentioned this, we had access since Obama. People have had access far before Barack Obama. I mean, this is not a partisan thing. And what I would say to that is that a lot of people who I've spoken with who have been ringing the alarm bell on this, they're Republicans. They're not people who are motivated by a sense of there are people in the government who are actually in favor of a Department of Government Efficiency. But because they work in the computer and IT space, they understand how these systems have been controlled, why they've been controlled, what all of these, procedures and security procedures are in place for. And they're watching unelected officials, not confirmed by Congress, not elected by the United States government. In one case, this organization is pretty much unofficially overseen by the richest man in the world who has billions of dollars in government contracts and a absolute slew of conflicts of interest in terms of having potential access to this data. I mean, Elon Musk runs Tesla, he runs SpaceX, he runs a lot of other small companies, he runs X, formerly Twitter. And having access to all this government data gives you access to contracts, national security, implications are very large in all of that, but also just competitive and corruption implications here. You can see where money is going. You can see who's getting money. You can undercut bids to other contractors to make sure that they don't get their contracts. And that's that's an anti-competitive situation there, and a massive potential conflict of interest. Maybe you don't care about that, but in terms of the second part of this, what is unprecedented? In the federal government IT infrastructure, I've talked to probably 60, 70 IT workers over the last month on this. This information is so sensitive, like all data, because once it leaves a system, there's nothing that you can do. You cannot recoup it. You cannot unring the bell as somebody.
It's out there, it's out there.
Yeah.
It's out there and it's out there. And a lot of this information is different than, information that comes from even your bank or Equifax or something like that. There's a lot of national security information. At some of these different agencies, there are covert people in the field whose identities are protected, right? There are national security secrets of all kinds embedded in all of this, right?
But in the past, someone always had access to this stuff, right? Like someone
Correct.
always could have conceivably viewed this, manipulated it, given it to a foreign adversary. Is there something different other than the fact that we don't trust Elon Musk and his particular surrogates? Like, are they doing something different other than the fact that there's reason not to trust them with the information specifically?
One source I spoke with has a top secret security clearance, and they tried to get access to one of these systems. So let's just use a government agency and say that there are 15 different IT computer systems. They were trying to access one of them. They've been working in the government for 25 years, and they have a top secret security clearance. And it took them 9 months and a series of about 15 or 16 interviews with different people up the chain. Now, you can make a case, as I'm sure Elon Musk would if he was sitting across from me, that
Yeah.
this is inefficient. But some of that information had access to secrets about, covert representatives across the world, who, if they were exposed, lives are in danger, and potentially there are national security implications. DOGE representatives got access to this system in 36 hours. Wow. Right? These are people, some of these people are under 30 years old, which is fine. I'm not trying to be ageist here, but they don't have many years of government experience.
Yeah.
In fact, they have no government experience. They don't know.
They say that's the calling card, though, right?
Yeah.
That they don't.
Right, but also at the same time, I think if you've ever been in an organization, there is institutional knowledge that is actually valuable, I would say. You can certainly get, lost in the sauce and can, overcomplicate things and make needless bureaucracy. I think everyone would agree that there's inefficiency in the government. I would also argue that, as some of these sources have told me, you need to understand sometimes what you're seeing. Yeah. And not only because you can't be trusted with the information, but sometimes you can go into these systems and you can accidentally change something, and it's not very easy to fix that. And sometimes those systems help the country run on time, right? Like you can theoretically mess around in some of this really old code, some of these systems that frankly do need to be updated. You can mess around with that, and veterans in Idaho no longer get their prescriptions processed. So, what happens there? Like the what I have learned in all this reporting is that the government serves a lot of very unsexy functions and does a lot of things in a kind of convoluted way that could be made more efficient. But in order to do that, you need to really understand these systems. You need to understand where the inefficiencies are. You need to be really doing a lot of the difficult work of knowing what you're looking at. Yeah. And that takes time. And that is not something that we have seen from all of the reporting that we've done and that other people have done. It seems very much like let's rip the wires out of the mainframe because, we'll see what ends up happening there.
Yeah. I want to read this email from Chuck, who says the government and country are in very serious financial distress. Corruption and secret spending have been a concern for anyone with pragmatic common sense for decades. DOGE needs to happen, and the aggressive resistance to it demonstrates how embedded pork spending, obscure foreign program spending, and a whole lot more we have in here from Chuck. And so I want you to sort of lay out their arguments, because you said there's God mode in some places, there's read-only mode in other places. We don't know what levels of access DOGE has in these various agencies, but I want you to lay out, what is the argument for why DOGE, Elon Musk, why do they need that top level access, and what do they say they're going to do with it?
Well, that has not necessarily been articulated in a full way. That's also part of this, right? People who are working in the government, and I'm not just talking about, IT people who I've talked to inside these agencies are saying one of the issues is there's not really been a lot of good communication. A lot of people, including myself, have remarked on how the DOGE, we'll call it an incursion into the federal government, has a lot of like parallels to Elon Musk going inside of Twitter, right, when he purchased it, and a lot of that sort of organizational chaos, right? A lot of sending an email saying you've got 30 minutes to justify your job or you're fired, and then retracting that email. There was this fork in the road email that was sent out to millions of government employees, giving these options for you to get severance and resign from your job. And then it turns out, some of those things were retracted. It turns out they couldn't do it. There's this kind of, again, haphazard, improvised nature to this, that where it's not very clear what's going on, right? What they would say, I'm sure, based off of a lot of this reporting, is what they want to do is have full audit access to every single process, every single piece of data, every bit of information in the government, so that they can understand what is going on and also, find ways to shave down efficiencies, find ways to cut costs, to cut spending. One of the ways in which they really want to do this is to use AI tools to analyze and find these inefficiencies. And, I think that there are reasons that one could, believe this, right? And one could say, okay, this is what I've seen a lot of people in favor of this. Like, let's use the highest, levels of technology to scan for inefficiencies and things like that. Mm-hmm. There is also a real security issue with funneling all this information into large language models. Again, because of this idea that once it's in these things, you cannot get it out. You can also port it over elsewhere, right? There's also, there's issues with auditing those types of models. Government procurement, which is, the use of getting outside technology to make the government better in some way, a different tool, a different service that they pay for and hire, is a really complex and difficult process, very painstaking, in part because there's so much, the stakes are so high in all of this to make sure that our information is protected. Speaking to, again, these national security concerns, speaking to this idea, I think someone said something about, adversaries, spies, people like that getting access to this information. You can have, and it's possible that this has happened before, right? Somebody, an adversary or spy for another country, gains access to a government agency through, standard old employment, rising up through the ranks, or a government employee at an agency is converted into an asset for
old-fashioned spy work,
old-fashioned spy work, right? That person would ostensibly have access to maybe one of these systems if they're lucky.
Not all of them.
What happens in this sense when we port all of the federal government's data and information, including that national security information, into a large language model, and it is hacked because it's not properly securitized by China or something like that, and then they have access to absolutely everything.
And Charlie, I got to ask you, there was reasons why these agencies and their data had been separated. What does it mean when you feed it all into one? Can you talk about some of the vulnerabilities we now have when you have one? And I think you kind of talked about this, but I don't think we really have a clear understanding of what vulnerabilities exist when one entity has access to everything.
I think we really don't fully know, right? We don't know what the sum total of that is. We can make a lot of you know, conjectures and things like that. But this is part of dealing with an unprecedented situation. Is we don't know what is possible. We do know, however, that you know, there's been some reporting that one of these young engineers who works for DOGE, you know, used to work for a hacking consortium that at one point was involved with you know, distributing you know, pornographic materials and things like that among minors. It was like very kind of unsavory people. And this coder, this engineer, this hacker was kicked out of that group because he was leaking secrets from the hacking collective, and also he was they had said a fraud of an engineer. He was not actually good at the job of the hacking, so he was
Wow.
leaking secrets
bad hacker.
and inept. That person had access at some point to sensitive federal government information. So, you know, you have to ask, okay, let's say nothing happened there, right? And it, you know, there's no proof that anything has happened in that sense. That's just an example of the type of vulnerability. This is why you go through that extremely
25
strenuous
years.
process
Yeah.
of you know, background checks and understanding, because, you know, people who get to these levels of security clearance, and this is actually some.
And we
This
have,
is some
we
of
do
the
have to go to a
information.
break, Charlie
Oh,
Warzel, but we'll put a pin in that thought. Also want to talk to you about some of those hypotheticals, like what could possibly happen if access is granted broadly to Doge, what could be done, positive and negative, with all of that information. Hey, give us a call. 888-477-9499. studio2@whyy.org is the email address. You're listening to Studio 2 on WHYY. And welcome back, everybody, to Studio 2. I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent.
And I'm Cherry Gregg. We are talking about DOGE's God mode access to federal agencies and what it means for millions of Americans. With us is Charlie Warzel, staff writer at The Atlantic and author of the newsletter Galaxy Brain. And I want to invite you at home and watching on YouTube to join us in the conversation. Avi, give out the question and the number again.
Question is, what do you think about DOGE potentially having access to your private data? Give us a call, 888-477-9499. Email studio2@whyy.org, or leave a comment in the YouTube chat. Let me read a couple of them. Atlanta on YouTube says, I think they should be stopped as soon as possible and removed from what they're getting their grubby fingers into. Did anyone bother vetting these people? Background, security, etc. Hope says, we need access to his private data. I think the his there is Elon Musk. Okay. So, Charlie Warzel, I think a lot of people are looking at this through a personal lens, and they're worried about their own personal data. So, in a scenario where DOGE has access to just about everything, what would they have access to about the average American? And then what could potentially be done with that information?
Yeah, I think the way to think about it, because there's no easy laundry list, right? And also, I'm not in the government, so I don't have like full, I can't show you necessarily the receipts. But I think a way to think about this, as I have, is try to think about your interactions with the government in your life, right? And think about each agency that you interact with, right? Think about if you ever fly, right? And then think about the FAA and think about the information they have, tracking your movements across the country. Think about TSA, think about those types of things. Think about the Treasury and think about you filing your taxes and think about your bank account and your routing number. Think about, your social security number is the thing that kind of comes up all the time, right?
Yeah.
But that is, you give your social security number to a lot of things, and there's a lot of data breaches. Equifax breached the data of hundreds of millions of Americans a couple of years ago. There are issues with that, obviously, but that's sort of probably the most prosaic piece of information. I think, again, bank accounts, routing numbers. Someone I spoke to who's really worried about this, said that they don't think that banks are even thinking very strongly about, the fact that all of this information could potentially be exposed. When there are big hacks of government information, the information is relatively, prosaic. But when you think about this bigger, level, the higher stakes of this. So then, go through the Department of Transportation, think about your driver's license, all your information, all of your toll receipts, all of that. I mean, I just keep on extrapolating through all of these departments,
Quick
right?
follow-up.
Think about, go
Quick
ahead,
follow-up
please.
on that. Could someone conceivably manipulate that data? Like make it look like I committed tax fraud when I didn't?
Technically, yes. This is why some of these, again, I want to be very clear. There is not evidence of this at the moment. So I think it's wrong for people to really like freak out and think that this has happened. But I will say I had a government IT source who understands these systems really well saying that they put a freeze on all of their credit scores. Because they do not trust that this information could not be changed or manipulated. I think, for a lot of government employees are worried because they, in some of these circumstances where they have the full administrative access, which is you can manipulate that data if you want. They're worried that someone's going to go in and, in the name of efficiency, change all of their salaries without any going through any official channels, right? Just change a 5 to a 0 or whatever. That is within the realm of technical capability. They could do that. There is no evidence that has happened. I want to be incredibly clear, but this is part of the concern. One source told me that one of the biggest fears in IT with getting this, it's called super administrative access, what I refer to as God mode. One of the fears with that is once you go into that, if you have that highest tier of access, you can do multiple things. You can do something called creating a backdoor, which is basically creating an opening inside the system for people who don't have to go through the login credential, system normally. Theoretically, you could invite anyone you want, right? And then the other concern is you can do things without being traced. Without
make changes and no one can tell that you made the changes.
And so we might not even know what they did. I want to just encourage our listeners to call in. What do you think about DOGE having access to your private data? The number is 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to leave your question or comment in the chat. We have a caller, Mary from Philadelphia, says she's concerned. Mary, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
My comment is that this is all completely outrageous, and something has to be done about it, like yesterday. Where is Congress in all this? I can't believe they can't do anything about it, or at least take the whole matter to court. and stop it in its tracks until it can get to the Supreme Court. This is something we really have to fight. I can envision a situation where someone gets hold of my Social Security number and my bank account and uses it to make outrageous fake purchases or enter into contracts that would involve me, create debt in my name. I'm a senior citizen. Almost my whole income is my Social Security check. What would I do if someone used my name, Social Security number, bank account number, and created all manner of debt in my name and then skipped out on it?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Do you have anything else to add, Mary? Oh, Mary's gone. Mary's gone. That's Mary from Philadelphia. She raises a lot of concerns, Charlie, and she also asked the question, can this be stopped? We have all kinds of privacy laws. We have all sorts of confidentiality requirements when it comes to federal data. Is there any way to stop this or put some more protocols or security measures in place to protect the data of Americans?
I mean, again, we're in unprecedented territory, right? I think that's the issue here because, these systems, a lot of the laws, a lot of the procedures, a lot of the whatever protect people from getting access. Once you've been given access, it's very difficult. And technically, one can make a case, and people are, and there are lawsuits here that are trying to stop some of this incursion and sort of freeze, right, what's happening right now. Some of those have been more successful than others, but there are challenges being mounted to people trying to access this data. The issue with all of this, and the reason why I keep tossing the term unprecedented around, is technically these are government contractors, right? If a person loyal to Donald Trump is installed as the chief information officer of one of these agencies, or the head of one of these agencies appointed by Donald Trump and confirmed by Congress, say, if they grant access to a 22-year-old coding employee who's a contractor, there's nothing you can really do because those are going through the official channels, so to speak. But there are lawsuits, there are things like that. I would just counsel this caller not to maybe worry quite as much about the individual, right? I know that we are talking about DOGE having access to your data, and I think that the outrage is right? Yeah. I think one should be outraged,
right?
On principle, having access to this data. What I would be, the example that I'm going to use is actually from today. The Washington Post just reported this, but yesterday Elon Musk said in a cabinet meeting that they're moving fast and they've made a few mistakes. They accidentally, got rid of funding for Ebola prevention, right?
And they replaced it.
Don't worry, they restored it. The Washington Post reported this morning that they have not restored it. And in fact, the programs are cut, they're destroyed, and the money is gone now. And that is something, Ebola is obviously a very serious illness.
It is.
It's also USAID, in the sense, is a part of America's soft power around the world, right? Providing aid to people in need is a thing that, helps American standing, actually is, can bolster our national security interests like that, but also make it so that we don't have, a deadly outbreak of disease that can then spread and come to our shores. This is a really good example of a bunch of people who are sort of new to this, the government processes, going into systems that maybe they don't yet understand, or moving too quickly with this information. And some of that information, money now is data, right? It's information. If you change and reallocate the funds, it's very difficult to claw that back. Somebody in the government told me once that when the government shuts down, right, just as it does when there's not, a budget,
debt ceiling, all that, yeah.
Correct. When that happens, they said it usually takes, for every week the government is shut down, it's a month of backlog because the government moves so slowly to get all the systems back in place, to get all the people back into place.
Right. So once you break it's very hard to put back together.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's how I would think about this.
Yeah, let me bring in a caller now. This is Eric from Exton. Eric, you're on Studio 2. Getting close to the end of the hour here. Eric, what is your question or comment?
Yeah, I don't have a concern about DOGE. I think it's absolutely necessary when you think about the existential threat of our country being $36 trillion in debt. And to watch a bunch of, 60, 70, and 80-year-old politicians, wringing their hands about, 19-year-olds taking a look at, our financial systems, I think is pretty rich when those same politicians are going to leave those 19-year-olds with $36 trillion in debt. And, of course, there should be safeguards. But, I know McKinsey's in there a lot of times with government contracts, and they're looking at things and trying to see, how money is spent. Of course, there's common sense things that need to be looked at. And if they're doing stuff like that, we should take a step and make sure it's being done correctly. But, all these programs are just, I just can't believe we're spending things on, like, plays and comic books when we're $36 trillion in debt. It's just mind-boggling. I know that's Congress, but Congress doesn't seem to want to
So you're
solve the
you're
issue.
saying this is a risk worth taking, Eric. Let these guys in there do whatever they do, and you're willing to live with the consequences.
I agree. I mean, I think it's a much higher risk than having some prescriptions. My father gets his prescriptions from the VA. I understand all that, but if that breaks for a week or two or a month, that's bad. But it's far worse as a country. We
what
spend
about
$1 trillion
forever?
just in interest. Yeah, just $1 trillion in interest. Think what you could do with that money if we didn't have to pay interest on it, and we're just adding.
Yeah.
Yep,
I want to make sure. I want to make sure
Yeah.
Charlie Warzel has a chance to respond to that, because that does capture the tenor of a lot of the pushback, right? Like what people are coming at this from the perspective of it's broken, so why not take a risk to try to fix it? Now the it there shifts around a little bit, but a lot of people have that mindset going in. What would you say back to that caller, Charlie Warzel?
Again, it's his opinion. I understand that. I think that it's illustrative of the fact of the reason why they're there, right? Because as you said, this is an opinion that is shared widely. I think again the concern that a lot of people have, right? I think a big one is national security. I also think another one is this idea of people not understanding the complex systems that they're dealing with, and the potential for risk being very large. He mentioned his father getting VA prescriptions. If that data is somehow deleted, messed with, and it's possible that it's not just going to be a week. It could be months, or it could be a system in which, that person is going to have to go through a series of, multiple appointments and rechecks to, and re-diagnoses and, an administrative process that is, very painful, and they're not getting the care they deserve. And I think that what people are really worried about here, and I understand why it seems like, again, like the bureaucracy is protecting itself.
Yeah.
And I know that people have a very dim opinion of the government, but I think what I have learned in this process is that a lot of the people who maintain these systems, who do this sort of work, it's very thankless work. They do it because they really care about providing things to people. They really care about the trains, quote unquote, running on time. And I think that they are just so concerned that the way in which this process is happening, I think they work in the government. They know it's inefficient.
Yeah.
But I think they are so worried because they know how easy it is to bungle these systems, to throw a wrench in them.
They're more worried with the process than the
back up.
goal. They're more worried with the process than goal, is what I hear you saying. Like some of them, you said some of them, a lot of the people talking to you are Republicans who might in principle agree with a lot of what Eric said, but they're also in these systems and they feel like, hey, this is not the way to fix them. And that's the basic what I'm hearing from you.
I think the way to think about it would be if you have worked your job for a long time and you understand what you're doing, whatever the job is, right? and someone comes in without any understanding of what that is and says, say, you're a carpenter.
Right.
And they say, well, I sell refrigerators and I'm damn good at doing that. And so I'm going to show you how to, be a carpenter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know is probably a decent enough place to leave it. Charlie Warzel, staff writer at The Atlantic, author of the newsletter Galaxy Brain. I kind of feel like there's a whole galaxy going on in my brain right now. And I'm trying to sort through it, but thanks for helping us.
Sorry about that.
That's probably how a lot of your conversations go.
Yes.
Thanks so much for helping us start down the path. Charlie Warzel, appreciate the time.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah, and thank you for everybody who wrote in and commented. We got so many, and for our callers today. And thank you to our producers, Debbie Builder, Paige Murray Bessler, and Andreas Copes. Thanks to Mike Schiffler, our visual producer. Thanks to Al Banks and Tina Calicay. And thanks to our executive producer, Kevin McCory, and Joan Isabella, WHYY's audio general manager. From Studio 2 at WHYY in Philadelphia, I'm Cherry Gregg.
I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent. We will talk to you next week. And tomorrow at noon, Marty Moscowane is on the air with The Connection. She's talking with a death doula who guides people through the end-of-life process. Join Marty for a conversation about facing our mortality and how talking about dying can actually help us live a better life.
And we, meaning Avi and I and our team, will be in Princeton tonight for our Studio 2 on the Road event about artificial intelligence. We hope to see you there, and we will be back next week. Coming up next on WHYY, it's Here and Now. See you on the radio next week.